My name is Emily Taylor Rogers, and this is Behind the Art. I'm Emily Taylor Rogers. I'm a mixed media artist, and I currently live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've been into art as long as I can remember. I don't really remember a time when I haven't done art. It's always been a creative outlet for me, and I started taking it more seriously when I was 18, my senior year of high school, and I decided to pursue art as a career and go to college for it. I'm originally from Michigan. I moved to Philadelphia about 3 years ago because Philadelphia has such a great art scene, and that was a huge factor for me. I wanted to move to a city that had a way bigger art scene than Kalamazoo, but also wasn't too crazy like New York or LA. We moved here and I've absolutely loved it. I've so far been able to actually start a career as an artist here, which, you know, I didn't really know if that was going to happen or not, but I absolutely love living in Philadelphia, and the underground art scene here as well as the fine art scene here is everything I could have looked for when trying to start pursuing being a professional artist right out the gate. So currently I work primarily with mixed media painting and drawing, and I chose to do that because that's kind of where my roots are with art. I've always drawn and I've always painted, and it's something that I can do from any location, really. I went to college for my BFA in printmaking, which I wanted to challenge myself to get a more rounded experience and learn a lot more of other different techniques and different mediums. But after graduating with my BFA, I decided to come back to my roots of drawing and painting. So the concepts that my art center around are a lot about spirituality and femininity, and that comes from kind of my experience, and I think it's a lot of relevant topics and the way that I view them as also kind of bigger otherworldly things and spiritual things. So a lot of my work you'll see like celestial objects, and for me I look at a lot of, you know, the things that we deal with on a daily basis in society and even politically. I think that, you know, we're dealing with a lot of stuff that can broaden the way that we look at things in a worldly way and even a spiritual way. For me, I have to keep myself motivated. It's a lot about personal motivation and holding myself accountable. I think that in a way social media really helps artists, but in some ways I think it can hinder artists. You know, artists now can reach masses that they never could have reached before without social media, which I think is huge. And a lot of people are becoming really successful because of these marketing venues. But I also think that it can be a little hindering because it somewhat distracts from the actual creative process, and a lot of people can get really caught up in the numbers of likes and comments. So for me personally, I have to constantly remind myself not to get too focused on the nominal things and not focus too much on social media, and really remember that at the end of the day, it's all about the creative process. So my creative process usually starts out with a concept. I was taught conceptual thinking a lot and concept-based art a lot in my BFA, and so that's the way that I create a lot of my work. And so usually it starts off with an idea or a concept, and I'll kind of let it marinate in my mind for a little while, and I'll come up with a visual image in my head of how I imagine getting this concept across. And then when I feel ready, like the concept is enough developed, I will actually, you know, step in front of the canvas or the paper. Whether I draw or I paint kind of depends on the concept itself. Sometimes it doesn't matter and I could really do either, so it just kind of comes down to what I'm feeling like doing at the time. But, you know, I always have an idea of how it's going to end up looking. And so, you know, sometimes painting is a better option to get the finished product that I'm looking for. Sometimes it's drawing. Once I actually, you know, have this idea in my head, I'll execute it the way, you know, the best way I see fit based on the mediums that I know. I often use I'm a mixed media artist, so I often use a mix of mediums in my pieces, including if it's a painting, acrylic paint, and oil paint. If it's a drawing, then usually it's graphite, colored pencil, and I I always include gold or silver leaf. For me, it's always hard to know what point the artwork is really finished. When I get to a point where I feel like I've executed the concept properly, that's, I guess, when I step away. Or more often than not, it's when I hit a deadline, because I usually have a deadline for a piece, or a deadline that I set in my head, because if I don't, then I could work on a piece forever and change it a million times and possibly never feel like it's done. My best advice for artists who are trying to start their career is just do it, because it's never gonna ever feel like the right time. And I actually heard that advice from a podcast when I was working a full-time job at a photography production company, and I felt completely drained, and I felt completely unmotivated, and I felt like, you know, why am I working 40 plus hours a week for someone else's dream? But at the same time, I didn't feel ready to jump off and be an artist myself. I was terrified of the idea. But I heard on a podcast I was listening to from another creative, they're like, it's never gonna be right. It's, you know, this life is crazy, and it's just never gonna be the right situation to be like, oh, now I have, you know, enough money, or now I have enough time. You just have to like bite the bullet and go for it. And when you make that jump, you're actually going to push yourself to actually make it happen. That fear will fire a little, you know, it'll light a little fire under your butt, and it'll push you forward, and you'll decide, you know, I'm gonna make this happen because I have to now. So that's my best advice for somebody who's starting their career. Somebody who is, you know, in the midst of it, you know, who's kind of, I guess, at the stages that I'm at, it would be to not get too discouraged when things don't 100% go your way, because I have to constantly, you know, deal with that kind of stuff, and every other artist and every other creative I know is constantly dealing with roadblocks and no's. You know, you're gonna hear no so many times, or you're gonna get, you know, rejected, or you're not gonna get into a show you want to get into, or, you know, you're not constantly going to get the gratification that you want. So I think that for, you know, anybody who's pursuing a career, when you're in the middle of it at any point throughout your career, and throughout, you know, pursuing your passion, you're gonna have to just like remember to not get discouraged to the point to give up, and remember to rest, but not to ever just walk away from it.